All right, ready? Okay. Hey guys, it's Cyrus of Chaos. Today I'm here with self-important, washed-up liar Marcus Schulz, and today we're going to be going through the article that interim president Emanuel Katsiadakis wrote in response to his interview with German news outlet ARD. Boy, Marcus, the FIE sure has some nice things to say about you. I think I introduced you pretty well already, but if there's anything you want to add to that, please feel free.
I don't know, but I think most of the people who will see this, they already know who I am. Yeah, in a good or bad way. So my name is Marcus Schulz. I used to serve as a FIE referee from 2008 until 2023. I was in the master list for many years, refereed World Championships, European, Pan Am, Mediterranean, whatever, all sorts of competitions in saber. Before that, I used to be a member of the German national team in Bundeskader, so-called. I used to fence in Tauber-Bischofsheim and in Bonn, which were big fencing centers at the time. I had a Hungarian coach and a Russian coach that educated me over all the years. And after I finished my career to pursue my law studies, I actually returned to fencing as a referee at the age of 26. And in 2008, I then received my B license in saber and later in foil. And I stepped down last summer.
Got it. In the midst of all the controversy, I think you said because of what happened with Olga Karlan at World Championships, right?
I was refereeing in Krakow at the European Games, which is a little bit contradictory to what the president of the FIE says, because I was kicked out from the list of referees, but just a month before I deliberately asked to be discharged from the list. I refereed still the European Championships. So I don't know if that's what you usually award referees to, that are washed out. I don't think so.
So yesterday, Katsiadakis published a piece in Euronews, which is a news outlet online, and it was a pretty entertaining article just from a comedy perspective. So we're gonna go.
I read it, and I was looking for the right word to characterize that pamphlet, and I think it's childish. No, it was really. I was thinking, is it pathetic? Is it like ruthless? What is it? No, it's just childish. It is so full of ego, so full of narcissism, but it has really very little to do with the truth.
Yep. I agree. I was rolling my eyes constantly. But we're going to read that article and just kind of go through and just break it down paragraph by paragraph so we can everybody who is not in the know can understand what's going on here. Can you see what I'm seeing?
Okay, yes. That's the article.
Perfect.
Euronews, isn't that the news station which was just purchased by a close ally of Viktor Orban?
I think that is correct. I was actually hearing about that.
Very closely connected to Putin.
Yeah. It always seems to come back to that, doesn't it?
I mean, that's all. I think it's all a coincidence.
Yeah, it must all be a coincidence. Too convenient otherwise. All right. So, let's see. The inexorable desire to subordinate sports to politics is disappointing. People should compete only in sports and do it fairly, and fencing attacks should only occur in a fair bout on the fencing field. Quoted by FIE interim president Emanuel Katsiadakis. So even just starting with that, it's a little bit silly. I mean, there are so many situations in which politics and sports are existing together. I mean, most European fencing federations are funded by the government in some way, and they're sending their people to compete against other countries, and when you win, your flag is hung up and your national anthem is played above other people's. So I don't understand the inherent idea that sports and politics are separate. They seem very interconnected to me, but...
I mean, only a fool can believe that, right? I mean, sports is the most political thing that you would ever kind of endeavor.
Yeah. And pretty much anywhere there's subjectivity, you're going to have corruption seeping in for that reason.
Unfortunately, especially in sports which have a subjective element to it. I mean, long jump, marathon, I don't know, these are sports that are not so easily manipulable. But, the sports that have a subjective element to it, like boxing, rhythm, gymnastics, ice skating.
Yep.
And where you are dependent on referee and influence, you always have kind of, the possibility that subjective opinion comes in, and with that you allow influence from outside. And as sports are labeled as non-political and kind of innocent, this then of course opens a big gate for people to kind of push their interests through under the cape, of innocence, which is of course, every person that has half a brain knows that this is, completely connected.
Yeah. So the fencing competition program at the Olympic Games in Paris marked the triumphant return of one of the oldest and most beautiful sports in the world to its historical homeland. So some people watching this may not know that fencing is actually one of the 5 original sports that's been in every Olympics, and this was a spectacular venue. So it was nice to see it in a situation where it was so beautifully presented and in a way that was so spectacular. Like, there were so many really cool viral moments.
French know how to do it, the French have aesthetics. This is a country that savoir-vivre comes from. These people know how to present these things. Cultures about elegance, about enjoying life, and I think it was a perfect environment for the games. It was spectacular.
Yeah. But right away, we're getting to a mistake. Athletes representing 53 countries and 4 continents took part in a real festival of fencing with épée, saber, and foil. Wait a second. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa? Is my math wrong?
Not the Australians were uninvited, maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. Regardless, that's a bit of a weird mistake. Unfortunately, as is the case at major events, there were those who tried to cast a shadow on this worldwide sports festival. I think he's talking about us, mostly you, but a major German news company relayed accusations of manipulation on the part of saber referees and the leadership of the International Fencing Federation.
It's not a company, it's actually, the state-run public media, so it's not a company.
Interesting.
It's
I did not know that.
It's the biggest German TV station.
The charges... Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah.
The charges were based on statements made by a retired German fencing referee who was allegedly offered a bribe several years ago. To begin with, any attempts to bribe a judge should be reported immediately to the FIE authorities. The FIE has no record of such a bribe made by the referee in question, and I guess he's saying that because it wasn't reported, that no bribe has ever happened. So why wouldn't someone who was offered money or a bribe in the sense of I guess more power or something, why wouldn't someone like that come forward about it?
It's a legit question. And it's a mistake from my side back then, because I was actually anxious. I was afraid to report it because I knew that my ex-coach, who was also a Soviet coach before the fall of the Soviet system, and connected to Usmanov personally, that he was very powerful. He was connected to me as an athlete. I knew that. Because everywhere he went in the world, everybody respected him. He was, highly regarded. He had the contacts in America and everywhere. So I thought, if I go now, and what will you say? It's a word against a word, and you're accusing your lifelong coach, basically.
Yeah, a father figure.
Father figure, and you go and say he tried to bribe me, and he said it's absolutely not true. What will happen? What is happening all these years? Why is no other referee coming forward, even though everybody knows that there's a lot of bribery going on in our sports? Everybody's seen it for 20 years, 30 years.
Yep.
Well, because people are afraid.
Exactly.
And I was afraid. And I was just about to get back on the master list. I was taken off to 12, and then I was put back on to 17. They sent me to 16, and they told me you will be back on the master list. You get a European qualifier. You get the German. You get the World Championships in 2017 in Leipzig, which I got. And from that time on, I was put by the structure which was close to my coach before the Russian influence. They put me back in the game because they were the ones that took me off. And I was afraid. I was simply afraid, and I should have reported it, but I also knew it wouldn't change anything, and my career would be over.
Exactly.
And that was a personal mistake that I did. Yeah, this is something I should have done better, but I was just not the person that I'm today. Yeah, people grow.
It's also like you said. I think it's really important to understand that if you did choose to come forward, one, you probably wouldn't be believed because, like you said, it would be a he said she said situation.
No chance.
Yeah, and then when you come forward at that point, they're gonna tell you that you're off those lists again and you're out of the sport.
100%. No chance. You're gone. You are a traitor. Everybody loves treason, but nobody loves the traitor.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's it. And it's the same situation I'm facing now. Yeah, I've received, since I did interviews, Pablo Torres from the German news station, I've had some negativity coming over. And I said back then with Pablo, with the first interview, I said, you can be sure that the first thing that they will do is trying to discredit the source.
Mm-hmm.
Neither asked by the German Fencing Federation nor by the FIE who was the fencer that I should have refereed in favor of for this 5,000 euros they offered me back then. Nobody ever called me. The only thing that they did was trying to discredit the source. Nobody ever tried to shed light on what actually happened back then. And I knew, I said that in the interview, and this is what we know, people who are in the system know how it goes. And I knew I had no chance. And I knew my career would be over. So I swallowed it. Yeah, because that's how they work. They work with threatening and intimidating people. And that hasn't changed. That's why nobody else is really coming forward, other than one or two referees I heard now, that reported that too, but they won't be heard. And I knew that back then, but today I'm not afraid anymore. That's the difference.
Yeah, well, anybody who feels like the FIE is not going to take them seriously or won't believe them, reach out to me. I believe that these things are happening. I want to help make a difference, and it's only when we all stop being afraid and come together that we have a chance to fix this stuff.
It's the only way. That other people, gain the courage and say, okay, because there's so many things we know about them. Everybody speaks about them, but nobody wants to go on record. But we know so many people who are a little bit involved into international fencing know so many stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's afraid of, so they try to do everything to put that under the carpet.
Yeah, I agree. So the next paragraph, defamatory statements by a person who did not qualify in 2023 and was removed from the judges list by a panel of judges should not be taken at face value. We already discussed a little bit that Marcus chose to step down and was not removed.
In 2023, I was refereeing the European Championships, and I did a Grand Prix. And I was supposed to do more competitions when I called members of the German Referee Commission after that Karlan disqualification, which completely upset me. I have to say it was unbelievable, because I saw that the Russians have their tentacles everywhere, and Olga Karlan, even if she did the right thing, a German official, who is now a sports director of the FIE, plotted. He took the cell phone from the Russian coach. You can see that he was instructed. He goes back, and then she gets a black card. And that was the moment I said, okay, that's it. I'm out of here. And shortly after, I called Robert Lange from the German Fencing Federation, who was a part of the referee commission, and Alexander Schiffers, who was the head of the Saber in the German Fencing Federation. And I asked them to discharge me from the list, and then they said, why? We're in the middle of the season, we don't want that, could you please continue? And I asked them to be discharged. There was nothing from the FIE pointing to me not being good enough anymore, reevaluated, nothing. In the middle of the season, this doesn't happen. Everybody who knows a little bit of the technicalities of our sport can confirm this. So this is a blatant lie. Yeah, and I'm not afraid to say that, because I have proof. And this is all recorded by the German Fencing Federation. So what the president of the FIE is stating here is nothing but a blatant lie. And I find that shocking. That's the only reason why I decided to kind of get back on record, because I didn't want to kind of drag that any further. I have no interest to be in public. But this is a lie, and I'm not going to allow this.
Good, thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Secondly, today's fencing practice is transparent and fair. The current approach to refereeing and scoring in our sport makes accusations of facilitating corruption among referees absurd. I think this statement is laughable. As I've said in many videos recently, the fact that there's no clear criteria for how to judge actions in the first zone, which for anybody watching who doesn't know that term is the term that I use for when both fencers come together, and whether the action is attack counterattack or simultaneous or attack and preparation, any of those actions are at this point very poorly defined. Everybody has a different definition of them, and the difference between attack counterattack and attack and preparation is so tiny that
nobody doesn't know anything about the sport. And you heard this referee who did 2 gold medal matches at the Olympics in I think 88 and 92. He said he can't see 50% of the actions which happen today.
That doesn't surprise me.
That is the guy that was refereeing 2 Olympic gold medal matches. Yeah. So please tell me how a normal person, which is not involved in the sport, has no idea, should objectively be able to understand who is hit and who isn't.
Exactly.
And we know that fencing, saber fencing especially, has been steered into a certain direction that is getting harder to interpret and gives the referees much more freedom, and it was on purpose done like that, so that there was room for these people who are actually corrupting the sport. And we all know that this is the truth. And to deny this just shows in which camp this person is, that is not elected, but put as the FIE president, a placeholder. This is shameful.
I agree. Under the current system, there's no point in trying to bribe a particular referee, as referees are assigned to specific bouts by a computer without human intervention, and the names of the referees are announced less than half an hour before the start of the bouts. So basically they're saying here that because you don't know who your referee is going to be, and you won't until about 30 minutes before your bout starts, there's no point and no way to actually bribe these people. What do you say to that?
First of all, some referees are on kind of retainer by nations. So they get paid money for when they label it as kind of when they give seminars, refereeing seminars at these countries, and then they pay them money. So that's kind of a dependency. And it doesn't matter if you, first of all, the only thing that happens in Sabre is that the technical official there sits there and puts all the things by handwriting. All the referees are assigned by handwriting. Nothing is done by the computer. They're sitting there until 5 or 15 minutes before the bout, and they're putting in the referees. There's no computer doing that. That should be. That's the point where you could basically attack so many, competitions, because they're not applying the system. In theory, it's there. In reality, they get it, and they put everything in handwriting, and then they're changing it, and they're not officially announcing it, which they would be obliged to. But almost every referee from the 64. And even before, you can see that it doesn't make any sense, because some referees are only there from 128 and you don't see them from 64 anymore, even though they're FIE referees. Mm-hmm. And then you see certain important matches only being refereed by certain people. You saw that with Mitchell Saron. The likelihood that Milenchev would referee him in all these important matches was about 0.1. Yeah? The odds were, I don't know, thousands against it. How is that possible? If this should be the truth, this is a lie. Yeah, this is manipulation, and this is manipulation which is accepted and which is supported, by the organs of the FIE. And again, I'm sorry to repeat myself, everyone who has a little bit knowledge about how it works knows it's exactly that way. Yeah, the computer doesn't choose anything. It's always, and the sad thing is that technical officials send then their kids to America, to colleges, because they have done good service to certain people, and it's all like giving and receiving advantages. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a collaboration between technical officials, who are then supposedly the ones that should put the referees in on an objective base, and the referees who then referee, but everybody has its agenda. And that's it, our sport has become a candy shop for criminals and greedy people. And everything that's written there is just a blatant lie. And this is why I had to come on record and discuss that with you, because luckily there's some people that follow you and that understand and want to change it. But we have to tell the truth. We have to start telling the truth.
So one more thing I want to add to this line specifically about how bouts are assigned specifically by a computer. We kind of skipped over this step while we were talking about this, but they are assigned by a computer, but then the person who is in charge of the referees can move people around. And the reason that exists is not for a sinister purpose. It's because there are certain things like conflicts of interest, which we know that these people ignore. But in like an ideal world, if I'm an American living in France. It would say that I'm American on paper, but I'm still not allowed to referee anybody who is French or has a French coach at that point. And that's something that the computer wouldn't know or be able to detect. So the head referee delegate is supposed to be able to like know that information and move me onto another bout. That's how that's supposed to be used in reality. But in practice, when they move people from bout to bout, it can be to help encourage this sort of manipulation. So, like you said, if a certain country has a referee on retainer, that person can be assigned by the bout committee member to that match. And so it absolutely, even though it's assigned by a computer, it can be changed very easily by certain humans. And so they're like, this paragraph is just ridiculous.
I mean, if you know how fencing, matches are assigned, you see them, they're sweating there for 10 minutes and they always have to find the right, okay, this referee is not wanted by this federation, I put him here, I put him there, I have to put this referee, that's a difficult bout, I have to put them there. It's all just chosen by the technical official. Nothing is done by computer.
Yep.
Nothing. Literally. It's a hoax. It's a joke. It's pathetic. Yeah.
And I'm gonna bring this back to one more thing that I'm trying to do, which is get access to the FIE change logs. Whenever a change is made on the computer, it's logged by the program, but that information is only kept on the computer of the person who actually ran the program in person. So I really think it would be very interesting to look at those things, because if there really is nothing to hide, and this really is just being done randomly by the computer, the FIE should have no problem releasing those change logs. And yet, the only change log that I've ever seen was apparently met with absolute panic when the FIE heard that it came out. And why would that be an issue if that became public, if there's nothing to hide and it's really just being assigned randomly by the computer? So I really want to get my hands on those. So the next section, the sport that became universal. Thirdly, the fact that this is the first time we see a greater diversity of countries and athletes on the podium serves to prove not the alleged fraud of the judges, but on the contrary, the universalization of fencing, the model laid down by the FIE during the presidency of Alisher Usmanov. So, first of all, it's great that we are seeing more variety, but in a lot of cases, I'm going to skip one paragraph here. The recent Paris Olympics marked the debut of fencing athletes from Cape Verde, Nigeria, Kenya, Rwanda, and Cyprus. Among the medalists of the last Olympic Games were representatives of two northern African countries, Tunisia and Egypt. So it's great that we're getting more variety, but I think with one or two exceptions, all of these athletes train in either Europe or America, so it's not like Africa's program is developing so much. It's certainly getting stronger, and that's definitely the direction we want to see things going, but many of these people are training in Europe or America, and so it's not as diverse as he would want us to think.
It's shocking that president of the FIE doesn't know the difference between Nigeria and Nigeria.
I was going to say,
a Nigerian fencer at the Olympics being spotted, but I think if he's such a strong supporter of the fencing in Africa, he should maybe know the difference between Nigeria and Nigeria, because there was no Nigerian fencer to be seen anywhere. Okay, fair enough. Kenyan fencer was a German fencer, Alexandra Ndolo. Yeah, she changed, and I support her decision because she deserves it. She went to Olympic Games, and the others are all trained in France. And but there's for sure a lot of money going to African federations since Usmanov has taken presidency. And I'm not sure that all this money really trickled down to the local fencing programs, or if maybe some African federations have basically started to build up a little bit of a base first before they give the money onto fencers. So they better take this fences from Europe as a scapegoat to justify their very big deployment of money into local fencing programs, which results in all this diversity we can see now. We should be really thankful for that. And I'm pretty sure that Usmanov and all the people that are connected to him are very thankful for all these votes he receives from African countries, in favor of their agenda that they're pushing through. We are all really happy about that, aren't we?
Thrilled. So for decades, fencing remained the domain of Europe. Athletes from the old world shared the trophies amongst themselves, while fencers from other continents often did not even have the opportunity to participate in fencing competitions. Mr. Usmano's model corrected this imbalance, and now it is a source of pride for the FIE. Well, I'm so glad that the FIE feels...
Mr. Usmanov under the investigation of European and American, like police forces and these things.
I believe that is correct.
I don't know if it's completely appropriate to kind of hail a man which is, not a convicted but an alleged criminal. I mean, I hope that Mr. Osmanos will be freed from all these accusations, because I think he's a great leader. We like great leaders, Kim Jong-un and all the other people. But I'm not sure that is appropriate at the moment to praise him too much, before these investigations have not been concluded, finally.
I agree with that as well. Thanks to so many years of painstaking work, the FIE includes 156 associated federations and confederations representing all the continents. New countries from regions outside of Europe, the region that had historically dominated the sport, have cemented their positions amongst the fencing elite. So, of those countries that the FIE says have existing federations, I've heard accusations that some of those federations are not actually real federations. They don't send people to actual World Cups. They just exist for the sole purpose of voting in a certain direction. What is your opinion on that?
The president of the Afghani Fencing Federation at the World Cup in Tashkent, where Mr. Usmanov generously invited all the presidents of the Central Asian fencing federations for a summit, I would say, in the frame of a junior World Cup that happened in Tashkent, where it was very generously catered. Hotel, food, drinks, everything was for free. And all these presidents came there, and I was sitting next to the Afghani president. He said, we have only 3 fences in Afghanistan, yet we have the same vote in the American Fencing Federation.
Yes.
And I had the feeling that all these people were there to be a little bit aligned to a certain agenda, but it was only my impression. Could be that it wasn't like that, but I saw that there was fencing federations where I never saw any people competing anywhere, and I was wondering why such a summit was actually necessary just shortly before the FIE assembly, but it could be a coincidence. I don't know.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, in fencing it has the same kind of model as FIFA, another very fair and straight shooting organization in terms of voting, where each federation gets 1 vote regardless of how many members the federation has. And I haven't... How many
members are in the US?
Say again?
How many members do you have in the US in the US fencing?
I couldn't even begin to take a guess, but it's definitely over 100,000, easily.
So you have the same board like 3 in Afghanistan, is that true?
I haven't been able to confirm this myself, but somebody told me that Afghanistan has not sent a competitor to any World Cup at the FIE level in the last 5 seasons, and I haven't checked that out myself, but if that is true, it certainly seems like this is a federation that doesn't exist to actually increase attendance at these tournaments and build up a program there. It seems like it exists for something else, and whatever else that is, I'll leave it up to the imagination of the people who are watching this video. Allegedly. So, at the 2012 Olympic Games, Venezuela, Norway, and Egypt won medals in fencing for the first time. That's great. The recent Paris Olympics marks the debut of fencing athletes from Cape Verde. We already talked about this. Fencing is truly the cleanest sport. Oh, thank God. Over the past few years, fencing has taken a big step forward, embracing technology and becoming a more spectacular sport. Changes to the rules were made in order to eliminate passive fighting and make competitions more dynamic and showy. What do you think of those statements?
I mean, Yuki Ota, he had this great laser sword stuff, and I always show that to friends of mine to explain them fencing, and they're all like, well, you should do that.
That's really cool.
I know Tetsuya, Amari, he's a great referee, friend of mine from Japan, all these years that I've been in the circle. I've met very many decent people that love the sport, that try to really make it more attractive. They think about new ways of promoting the sport, because the way it is, I'm afraid if Thomas Bach wouldn't be there, it could be difficult to keep it in the Olympic program.
I agree.
Because just like, it has very limited spectators, it has very limited audience, and it's very hard to understand. So we need to change things. And I do love the sport, despite what these people try now to make out of me. I'm not doing that for my personal kind of narcissism, unlike the FIE president. But I really love the sport. And I respect that. I think we could do more. Yeah. But I think there's many talented people in our sport that are trying to make changes. And I'm fully supportive of that because, as personal life is about evolvement, I think the sport is as well. And, tradition is the illusion of permanency and should be reviewed.
I like that. I've never heard that before, but I really like that. Something I want to touch on specifically is this paragraph where he says changes have been made to make the sport more dynamic and showy. And that is, I think, specifically talking about the combativity rules, non-combativity rules in épée. But I think, honestly, Saber is the most boring it's ever been. There's so much of this happening. And those actions are things that spectators, one, find boring, and two, like we said before, can't understand. So if we want to make the sport more dynamic and showy, at least saber fencing, we need to find a way to eliminate this and get back to the exchanges that we all like to see.
You need a different timing again for the touches.
Shorter timing, for sure. I agree.
More plate action. If you see now a match between Naslimov and Montano in the late 70s, you're like, wow, that's beautiful fencing. Yeah, and even in the 90s, it was actually, people were able to understand fencing even if they weren't really deeply involved in the sport. And nowadays, it has been perverted.
Yep.
It has been tailor-made to the Russian school. I don't know why that happened, but, it kind of took a turn into one direction. And I think fencing should be freed from, this purely dynamic, two people running into each other, back to what it was, more blade action, more timing, more freedom for the fences, to perform real fencing. But there should be a political will for that. I think the fences would appreciate it, and the audience would profit from it.
Yeah, I agree. That's really well put. So, the wired touch detection system is a thing of the past. I'm not sure what that means. In addition, the campaign against doping has earned fencing the title of the cleanest sport. And I don't know anything about the doping situation. I have no idea what he means the wired detection system is a thing of the past. Weren't they using wires at the Olympics?
Yeah, but he thinks that in the future there will be boxes and blah, blah, blah. So he has to find things to make his presidency very triumphant, because he is a person that has an incredible ego. He is and he wants to be seen as a reformist, and everything during his reign was triumphant and groundbreaking. So I think he's just trying to pile up some stuff, but it doesn't have much substance, honestly.
So all these efforts have helped bring about a revolutionary change. At the Tokyo Olympics, for the first time in history, 12 sets of fencing medals were awarded instead of the usual 10, which means that athletes from more countries have chances to win them. That is true, and I think that's a good thing, and that may be the only truly true thing that he said the whole article so far.
I'm not even sure he wrote it, but for sure it has his signature, because it's very much about him, and if we know him, we all know that, he's very self-absorbed.
Mm-hmm. This was a major victory for the FIE and personally for President Usmanov, who had headed our federation for almost 15 years. And then...
Still doing it in the background.
Yeah, exactly. 15 years and counting. The inexorable desire to subordinate sports to politics is disappointing. I am firmly convinced that people should compete only in sports and do it fairly, and that fencing attacks should only occur in a fair bout on the fencing field. Written by Emmanuel Katsiadakis, interim president of the FIE. So
he would believe in that, or he wouldn't try to discredit that whistleblower over media. But he would try to launch an investigation to kind of maybe, reveal some truth, about fencing. So I think if he would really believe in what he wrote here, then he wouldn't attack like a whistleblower over the internet and media, but he would maybe have made an effort to launch an investigation about what I actually said back then. That makes me doubt his motives and his, uprightness. And I did a little background check on Emmanuel Katsiadakis, and there's a couple of interesting things. So he started studying in Greece when there was a military dictatorship, and was there for a couple of years. It was called the Greek junta. And, I know that from my mother because she's from Czechoslovakia, and when there was a dictatorship here, there was not really the freedom fighter children allowed to study, but more people that were compliant to the system, which I wouldn't, allegedly, now say that Katsidakis was somehow connected to it. But I know that these kind of times can deform people a little bit. And he is a bureaucrat. Yeah, he was served all his life in the Greek ministry and started his professional career even under the military junta in Greece, which, can be just a coincidence. But I think if you grow up in these times, I'm not so sure that you develop a really strong spine if you're not opposing the system. So you're used to kind of try to stay under the radar, try to function, and especially if you then serve the state. I think you learn your ways around. And I can remember when he ran for the EFC presidency, and he lost by a huge margin to František Janda from Czech Republic back then, because Janda had everything that the people wanted. He had grace, he was considered as a fair man, he was an entrepreneur, and he didn't do it only like for the satisfaction of his personal ego. And I think these are all the things that people missing with our current FIE president, because I think he's a bureaucrat. I think he's opportunistic traits. And I cannot be fully convinced that he's really doing the best for the sports, but it's mainly for himself and serving interests. And, this is a pattern that I see, developing over all his kind of professional career. So it's hard for me to believe that this man is really interested in the clean sport, but he would like just to present something. And, by labeling the games that he's responsible for as triumphant, I mean, that's already a bad start. Who does that with a little bit of humility and decency?
I agree. My opinion of him definitely changed a lot since reading the article. Like, I didn't have too much of an opinion of him. I just knew he was kind of there in the background. But after reading this, my opinion of him has taken a very sharp nosedive.
I know him for many, many years. And he was always a bureaucratic person, I'm not saying anything bad, but, and I always had the feeling that he was very, concerned about how he appears in public and how things that he is responsible for are being presented in public. He was kind of involved in that Luigi Mattilotti got scratched, I think, from the games in Tokyo, or from Tokyo.
So,
because he invited him to a World Cup in Athens, and he refereed a Greek fencer against another fencer in the final, and there was a minister of sports from Greece that he invited. And allegedly, Mattilotti decided something that he didn't like, so the Greek fencer lost, and he took it very personal, and I think he then kind of was responsible for the fact that Luigi Mattilotti, who was an excellent referee, was scratched from the 21 Olympics. Yeah. So if you cross his way, he doesn't apply common sense. He takes it personal. And that tells you a lot about his ability of being like a person of balance and, running a worldwide fencing federation. Because you need people with a certain grace. You need people with a certain understanding. You need people with tolerance. You need people with strength and with character. And I'm not so sure that he is assembling all these virtues in one person. And I think that many people think alike.
I agree. Is there any other story that you want to tell about him or about your time as a referee that you think is interesting for people to hear on this subject?
Well, I've encountered many situations which are not correct. I was brought up in a system, and I knew from the very beginning who was calling the shots. Back then it was more balanced when René Rock, still FIE president, there was always sustaining interests. Emil Beck, who was like the magician of German fencing, for sure also brought people. René Rock also paid federations, and allegedly. But I saw some things happening. And I was always aware that there's a certain third-party influence into our sports, but it was never such institutionalized and one-sided as it became over the last couple of years. And I think that's why I'm sitting here, because I have really no interest to be in public. And I had also no interest to deal with Osmano's lawyers, which he sent after me. It's funnily lawyers that represented the far right-wing fascist German party recently as well, which are allegedly funded by the Kremlin to kind of stir up German politics. And exactly their lawyer is the one who's representing Usmanov, and he came after me, a yellow press demagogic person. And I was like, okay, that makes sense, And I had no interest to further appear in public because it's not about me. It's about fencing. I was hoping to encourage other people, but now that they're trying to attack me personally, again, I have to take a stance because that's not correct. Yeah, and I think we have to take that further. We have to finally encourage people to speak up. But we could maybe encourage a change, and I think that would be good for everyone who really loves the sport and doesn't use it for his own personal interests.
I agree. And something I've said a lot to people about this is I don't think that right now everybody has a fair shot to win their matches. And as long as I feel like people don't have that fair shot, I'll fight very hard to make sure that everybody gets it. Because this is not a fair situation. A lot of people have committed their lives to this, and during the last Olympic season, I think 4 American men's saber fencers quit or are seriously considering quitting because of the whole corruption situation that's allegedly been going on. And one of them, I asked about it, and he's like, my life pursuit is meaningless, and so why should I give another second to this sport? And that's just a really depressing place that we've gotten to. So I'm willing to work pretty hard to make sure that nobody in my sport feels that way anymore. But it's going to take some work, and we need more people to speak up about this, because I've spoken to people who tell me that either they were offered money to throw matches, or that they were offered money to help somebody win a match, or even that a referee said that if you sleep with me, I will help your kids, or I'll help you do better in these matches, and yet those people have refused to come forward. So anybody who wants to have a conversation, I'm here to talk about it privately, but I would strongly encourage you to consider speaking up about this, because again, only if we speak up together is something going to actually change.
Together we can be strong.
Yep.
This is the message.
Agreed. Well, thank you for taking the time to discuss this. I know it's not an easy topic to talk about.
We are already embarked on that journey.
Yeah. The ship has sailed.
So, thank you, Andrew. You're doing great work.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So are you.
Have a good day.
And last but not least, I'd like to thank my Emerald and Platinum patrons, David Amrani, Jonah Atkinson, Tiffany Miller, Roman Bruce, and Veronica Saran for their very generous contributions to this channel. Any other names you see are gold patrons. Thank you guys so much for the contributions. They really help out a lot and will enable me to make more videos like this. If you have any more ideas for what you want to see next, you can vote on those things on my Patreon page. To help support the channel, you can find links to my Patreon, PayPal, and Venmo accounts in the video information. Thanks guys, see you next time.